Now I'd like to talk about a rationale for providing C as an option to deaf education. What I mean by this title is that in recent years, some publications, some programs only talk about ASL or the oral option. But of course, we believe there's a third option, signing exact English. It's not surprising that when hearing loss is first diagnosed in an infant or toddler, most parents and professionals focus on obtaining assistive listening devices and parent-child communication. The acquisition of age-appropriate English or literacy skills is often not an immediate concern. However, later, if the toddler or preschooler doesn't begin to use language as do hearing peers, concerns may arise. That is typically the time when the method of communication is discussed by the IEP team and written into the IEP. In addition, even if the child uses intelligible speech, researchers caution that excellent levels of speech intelligibility may mask the young person's language delay or language difficulty, especially with regards to CALP, or Cognitive Academic English Proficiency, as it is spoken, read, and written. In my textbooks, I defined CALP as Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, the kind of English that's needed for formal academic learning. This includes listening, speaking, reading, and writing about subject area content material. This level of English language learning is essential for students to succeed in school. Developing CALP usually takes 5 to 7 years. That means that a child should be in an academic program using grammatically correct English for at least 5 to 7 years before the method of communication is changed. Academic language acquisition isn't just the understanding of the content area vocabulary. It includes using skills such as comparing, contrasting, synthesizing, judging, those higher level thinking skills on the Bloom's taxonomy. Academic language tests are context reduced. That means there isn't much to look at that's helpful. Information is read from a textbook and has to be imagined, or if it's presented by a teacher, the student has to organize it mentally. As a student gets older, the context of academic tasks become more and more reduced. The language becomes more cognitively demanding. New ideas, concepts, and language are presented to the student at the same time. At our school, Northwest School for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children, we work to develop this age-appropriate English or age-appropriate CALP. A fudge sundae analogy can be used to explain CALP, as well as to discriminate speech from language development. The analogy represents the acquisition of linguistic competence using terms first proposed by Jim Cummins in 1980 and 1984. In the analogy, a child's speech articulation ability is represented by fudge and a cherry on the top, because most parents and teachers of the deaf strive for children to achieve their best possible speech intelligibility. Basic interpersonal communication, or the degree of English that is used routinely and includes known vocabulary and simple grammar, is represented by the ice cream. CALP, as defined earlier, is represented by the bowl. Research done here at our school has demonstrated that most of our students are capable of achieving CALP when we assess that using standardized tests of English language and reading ability. Let's see an example of this. Here's one of our preschoolers many years ago, Giovanni, who at that time used no speech or sign. As he grows up, he becomes eventually a middle schooler, able to think and express kelp.
You are playing cars. Cars, yeah. Say car, 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 car. Yeah. More car? More? More? Car? Yes, I hear you talking. You pick, oh, red car. Go, go. Oh, there.
May I get a squirrel, please?
Oh, you are asking for the squirrel. May I have the squirrel?
Squirrel.
Again.
May I have a squirrel?
Okay, listen again for the word the. Listen. May I have the squirrel? Oh, you are so close. Good job. Listen again for may I. May I have the squirrel? Good job. You may have the squirrel after we are finished with vocabulary.
Short O or long O?
Short O first.
O,
Name,
O,
sound,
O,
sound, word.
Olive.
Good job. Can you join him? Ready?
O,
Wait. Make sure your class is ready. Okay.
O,
Name,
O,
sound, word.
Olive.
Good. I hear great speech. I love it.
Need to be kind to each other. It's not okay to bully anyone. There's also an issue with people feeling like the police or other law enforcement are bullies. Some people want to call for help, but they are scared about what will happen when police arrive. Some people are being hurt by the police. People should feel safe and comfortable about talking to police and asking.
When children are deaf or hard of hearing and eligible for preschool, choice of communication is often discussed. This is because even with amplification, access to acoustic information, for example, the teacher's instruction, peers' social language, is degraded for children who are deaf or hard of hearing compared to information acquired by their hearing peers. And the vocabulary of most children with hearing loss is compromised. This has been shown through research to occur over and over again. Even for students with mild hearing losses, the results can be underdeveloped communication abilities. In research, when general education teachers use an informal language checklist to rate children who are wearing cochlear implants and interacting in their mainstream classrooms, children have been rated as poor in their communication abilities. This isn't the case for all children who use listening and spoken language, but here I am discussing the children who are deaf or hard of hearing and working to develop articulate speech and age-appropriate English. For example, when only children who use CIs or cochlear implants have been studied, Gears and Moog and their team and other researchers have emphasized the need for communication alternatives because some learners continue to lag behind their hearing peers. Norris and Marshock, 2014, suggested that CI using children as a group rarely reach levels of academic achievement compared to hearing peers, regardless of whether the children are enrolled in a LISLS program or American Sign Language, ASL programming. This is an outcome that has remained remarkably persistent over time. I want to specifically talk about the issue of whether sign hurts speech development. Recently, there's been a number of articles published, all of which use the same group of children. The data was collected in 2008, and quite a bit has happened and changed since then. When the authors and their colleagues discussed the findings of these various studies based on these children, they questioned whether sign hurt speech development. In addition, it's important to look at the methods that they used. Data was collected by parent report. It wasn't filmed or analyzed. And it was collected just before surgery at 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months. Long-term sign use was defined as positive for sign language, undefined, used at baseline or 12 months, 24 or 36 months post-implant. The responses were divided into two categories: less than 50% reported use and more than 50% of the day use. None of what was reported was substantiated by the researchers. No signed voice ratios were calculated. The authors did not provide a definition of the terms they were using, and they didn't include an analysis of the children who use sign in their educational programs, as is discussed here. That is to say, it is important to consider if you can make a fair judgment of whether sign use would hinder speech based on children who used it only up to 3 years of age and then used it to a degree reported by parents. I hope from the information presented in these sessions, you will see how here at Northwest School for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children, sign can assist speech development. Most researchers agree that there is a lot of variability with CI benefit. Some children do very well, and some children need the addition of signing exact English. You can contact me for examples of the research I have talked about, or you can consult the Journal of Early Hearing Detection and Intervention, the October 2018 issue that I am using as a basis for my webinar here. In addition, CI users may evidence age-appropriate literacy outcomes in the early school years, but not maintain it in the higher grades. This has also been researched. Especially when children who are deaf or hard of hearing are younger and still acquiring English, they can have difficulty hearing all parts of English, those important parts of syntax and grammar. Here is just a sample of relevant research to this point. Cannon and Kirby, 2013, studied 26 children who are deaf or hard of hearing, 5 to 12 years of age, with whom sign was not used. These researchers found that the children had difficulty with parts of English such as regular noun singular or plurals, such as car compared to cars, noun-verb agreement for the verb be, such as he is, they are, prepositions, such as what form to use or including them at all, the auxiliary be, past tense, such as climb compared to climbed, and they were inconsistent in their production of all tense markers. In a 2012 research article entitled Students Who Are Deaf and Hard of Hearing and Use Sign Language, Considerations and Strategies for Developing Spoken Language and Literacy Skills, the authors found that sign did not hinder speech development. This is the work of Deborah Nussbaum, Betty Waddy-Smith, and Jane Dole, published in the Seminar in Speech and Language, Volume 33, Number 4, 2012. They wrote, when addressing spoken language development for children who sign, it's important to understand how sign can positively impact auditory, speech, and spoken language development. The following benefits of sign should be shared with both professionals and families. Neuroscientific research demonstrates that the brain has the capacity to acquire both a visual and a spoken language without detriment to the development of either language through either modality. Mounting evidence documents how the development of early visual linguistic competence can then effectively be used to map, link, and facilitate spoken language. A strong body of evidence documents the linguistic advantages of early visual language for deaf and hard of hearing children. There is a lack of evidence demonstrating that visual language inhibits long-range spoken language outcomes. Spencer, Ty Murray, and Tomlin, 1998, found similar parts of speech missing in children who were not exposed to signing exact English. 32% of the Lissel children they studied could not produce the third person S, and 51%, over half, did not produce the past tense ED. They concluded that the amount of comprehensible input that the children with CIs can perceive influences the acquisition of inflectional morphemes, such as tense markers. That is to say, if you don't sign these parts of English to these children, they can't acquire them. They don't hear them. As a group, these researchers also found that although the speech of implanted children improved after they were wearing their CIs, there was little progress between the 4th and 6th years of CI use when it is not supported by sign. Other researchers have found this same outcome. Even when children are described as hard of hearing or having a mild hearing loss, whereas studies done here at Northwest School for deaf and hard of hearing children have shown no plateau in listening, speech development, and receptive and expressive English. These skills continue to improve here year after year, grade after grade. The ability to manually code the many bound morphemes of English is also important to obtaining literacy. As Easterbrooks and Stephenson, 2006, explained, word meanings are expanded, modified, and changed routinely by affixing single and multiple morphemes to the front and ends of root words, such as unknown. If students who are deaf or hard of hearing are reading and writing well, they must have facility with the morphemic system, say these authors. Let's take a closer look at some curriculum to make this point. For example, here we use the National Geographic Windows on Literacy. In the kindergarten level of that series, morphemes such as ed, en, er, ing, ist, the plural s, the third person s, the suffix self as in myself, and y, as well as the irregular past tense and the contraction apostrophe s such as what's, appear in the stories. One word, bakery, contained 3 morphemes at the kindergarten level. Bakery. In 2013, I reviewed readers for first grade published by Harcourt and found that to read and comprehend first grade level material, a student needs to comprehend and express at least 10 additional bound morphemes. Dis, n as in broken, ly, full. These are understood and used by hearing 6-year-olds who are prepared linguistically to read them. But what about children who are deaf or hard of hearing? How are they prepared to read kindergarten and first grade material if they've never been exposed visually to these important parts of words? Of course, by third grade, there's even more. 33 I counted. This information, again, appears in the article that was published in October in the Journal for EDI. Many readers who are deaf or hard of hearing do not use a grammatically accurate sign system, or who assistive devices don't produce a clear enough signal, don't have access to these kinds of markers if they're not fingerspelled or signed in some way. There is possibly a relationship between the finding that most students who are deaf or hard of hearing read at the fourth grade level when they graduate from high school, and this type of lack of access. In my work in 1988 and 1990, I found that C-using children had better language, English language, and better reading abilities than children who use PSE. Nielsen and I and others in 2019 found that most students in a C program had intelligible speech, average English language abilities, and read at or above grade level. These studies are all part of the JEHDI article. C has proven to be an appropriate option when compared to other methods of simultaneous communication for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, when English is the desired language for instruction and social interaction. However, the research on C is often ignored, and the method is frequently not offered as a communication option for families and professionals. While more research on all the communication methods is warranted, parents and instructional staff deserve to be given information on all methods of communication that might assist children and families.